Nobody in Cleveland wants to admit this yet, but what happened that night wasn't just another rough game you flush down the drain and move on from. It felt heavier than that. Colder, like something cracked in real time, right there under the lights. Soldier Field didn't just expose a stat line or a bad matchup. It exposed a reality the Browns have been trying to outrun since draft night. You can point to the temperature if you want. You can talk about the wind slicing through the stadium, the frozen turf, the breath turning to smoke before it even left a player's mouth. You can blame protection breakdowns or missed assignments. That's the easy part. That's what everyone does the morning after. But none of those excuses explain the feeling that settled in before the game even found its rhythm. There was an uneasiness from the opening snap, like the night was already decided, and everyone on the field just hadn't caught up to it yet. This was supposed to be a measuring stick moment, December football, a hostile environment, the kind of night that tells you whether a quarterback is built for what's coming next or just passing through. And instead of rising into that moment, the Browns looked like a team bracing for impact. Not fighting it, bracing for it. That's the part that should scare people the most. Because this wasn't chaos. It wasn't desperation football late in a lost season. It was methodical, slow-burning unraveling. Each series chipped away at belief. Each stalled drive made the cold feel a little sharper, the silence a little louder. You could feel it in the stands and through the screen. This wasn't a crowd waiting to explode. It was a crowd waiting to be proven wrong, and that proof never came. What made the night unsettling wasn't just the mistakes. It was the body language, the pauses between plays, the way momentum never even flirted with swinging the other way. There was no spark, no moment where you thought, okay, here it comes. Just a creeping realization that the Browns weren't dictating anything. They were reacting, surviving, hoping the clock would move faster than the damage. And that's when the thought starts to creep in, the one nobody wants to say out loud. What if this isn't a bump in the road? What if this is the road? What if the plan everyone bought into looks a lot different when the weather turns and the lights get harsher? Cold games have a way of stripping things down to their core. They don't care about hype or preseason narratives. They don't care about brand or expectations. They ask one simple question: can you function when comfort disappears? That night didn't answer it in a reassuring way. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. By the time the final minutes ticked away, it didn't feel like the end of a game. It felt like the beginning of something the Browns aren't ready to confront yet, and what happened next only made that feeling impossible to ignore. The uncomfortable part of this story starts with a decision that never shows up in the box score. It starts with the plan, or more accurately, the lack of flexibility in it. Because when you zoom out and look at the circumstances of that night, the approach taken by the Browns raises questions that are hard to brush aside. This wasn't a warm afternoon game where timing routes and deep drops make sense. This was brutal, late-season football with swirling wind and frozen hands, and a rookie quarterback making one of the toughest starts of his young career. In situations like that, most teams simplify. They lean on the run. They shrink the field. They protect their quarterback and let the game breathe. That's the blueprint we've seen work for decades. Instead, Cleveland did the opposite. From early on, the offense felt rigid, almost stubborn. Long dropbacks, empty looks, minimal help on the edges, the kind of calls that demand perfect execution from a quarterback who's still learning the speed of the league. It put all the pressure on one player to make everything right in conditions where nothing comes easy. That's not development. That's exposure. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because some around the league have started to whisper that this wasn't just poor judgment. Rumors suggest there were internal disagreements about how the offense should look that night. Reports claim the quarterback wanted more movement, more play action, more ways to keep defenders from teeing off. Whether that's true or not, what we do know is this: the adjustments never came. That matters, because when a young quarterback struggles and the plan doesn't change, it sends a message. It tells him he's on his own. It tells the locker room that the system matters more than the moment. And in the NFL, players feel that instantly. What made it worse was the response on the sideline. No visible urgency. No signs of recalibration. Just the same calls, the same looks, and the same results. It felt less like a coach searching for answers and more like one waiting to see how much his quarterback could endure. Maybe that wasn't the intention. Coaches want to win, and nobody willingly sets themselves up to fail. But intention doesn't matter when perception takes over. And by halftime, the perception was clear. This quarterback wasn't being eased into the storm. He was being left in it. And once that line is crossed, everything that follows feels inevitable. There's a point in every game where noise fades and truth takes over. For Cleveland, that moment didn't come on a big hit or a highlight play. It came in the silence that followed a mistake. The kind of silence you can feel through the screen. After the interception, the camera caught something that should have raised alarms immediately. No quick pats on the helmet. No lineman leaning in with a word of reassurance. No receiver offering a shrug or a "we'll get it back." Instead, the quarterback walked to the sideline alone. He sat down alone, a jacket pulled over his head, eyes forward, disconnected from everything happening around him. That might sound small, but in an NFL locker room, it's not. Quarterbacks live and die by trust. When things go wrong, teammates usually rally, especially around a young player. That support isn't just emotional, it's strategic. It keeps panic from spreading. And on that sideline, none of it was there. The offense didn't circle up. Nobody stepped in to slow the moment down. The defense ran back onto the field while the offense stayed scattered, fractured, distant. You could almost pinpoint the second when belief cracked. From that point on, every mistake felt heavier. Every incompletion dragged. Players started looking at the ground instead of the huddle. Hands went to hips. Communication shortened. The game didn't spiral out of control. It stalled. And that's worse. A stalled team is one that's already accepted what's coming. What made the scene unsettling wasn't anger or yelling. It was resignation. This didn't look like a group fighting through adversity together. It looked like individuals surviving their own reps. That's when the cold really set in. Not the temperature, but the emotional drop that turns a competitive team into one just waiting for the clock. Moments like that don't stay on the sideline. They follow teams into the locker room, into meetings, into the next week. And once a team goes quiet like that, it's rarely about just one play anymore. What happened on the field was bad enough, but what really sent shockwaves through the organization had nothing to do with a throw, a sack, or a blown assignment. It came from above. From the place where patience is measured differently and decisions carry permanent consequences. Ownership doesn't panic publicly. When owners get visibly restless, it's usually because their minds are already racing ahead to uncomfortable conclusions. That's why the reaction from the Browns' owner that night raised eyebrows across the league. Reports from people in attendance suggest he didn't stick around to see how it ended. He didn't wait for the final minutes, the handshakes, or the post-game rituals. He left early. That might not sound dramatic on its own, but in NFL circles, that's a loud statement. Owners sit through ugly losses all the time. They sit through blowouts, rebuilds, and meaningless December games. Walking out before it's over signals something else entirely. It suggests disappointment has crossed into frustration. And frustration, at that level, rarely stays contained. This is an owner with a long history of reacting decisively when things don't align with expectations. Coaches, general managers, and quarterbacks have all felt that reality in Cleveland before. The margin for patience here has always been thin, especially at the most important position on the field. So when word spread that the owner wasn't even in the building by the fourth quarter, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like a warning. Adding to the tension were whispers about what happened afterward. A closed-door meeting took place not long after the game ended. No cameras, no leaks, just top decision-makers behind a locked door while reporters were kept at a distance. Those meetings don't happen casually. They happen when something needs to be addressed immediately, before the narrative gets out of control. What makes this moment especially uncomfortable is the timing. This wasn't the end of a lost season. The stakes were still real. Playoff implications were gone, but futures weren't. Evaluations were happening in real time. Every snap mattered, not just for the players on the field, but for the people making decisions upstairs. And while nothing official has been said, the optics alone have consequences. Players notice when ownership disengages. Coaches feel it. Front offices feel it. It changes the tone of everything that follows. Suddenly, the questions get sharper. The tolerance for mistakes shrinks, and every upcoming decision carries more weight than it did the week before. Owners don't leave games early unless something fundamental feels wrong. Not just execution, not just effort, something deeper. That night, the reaction from the top suggested this wasn't being viewed as a temporary stumble. It looked like the first crack in a belief system the organization had invested heavily in. And once ownership starts doubting the direction, the clock starts ticking for everyone involved. The comparison was unavoidable, and that's what made it hurt. It wasn't forced by analysts or stirred up by social media. It was right there on the same field, under the same conditions, impossible to ignore. Two rookie quarterbacks, same night, same cold, same pressure, and two completely different levels of control. On one sideline, there was calm. The opposing quarterback looked comfortable adjusting protections, pointing out pressure, keeping his offense on schedule. Nothing flashy, nothing reckless, just command. The kind that tells teammates, "I've got this." Even when plays broke down, the response was immediate. Quick decisions, short completions, live to fight the next snap. On the other sideline, everything felt heavier. The huddle didn't move with the same rhythm. Reads came slower. Pressure arrived faster. It wasn't about arm strength or raw talent. It was about how the game was being processed. One quarterback was dictating terms, the other was reacting to them. That contrast matters because the league doesn't evaluate rookies in isolation. Fair or not, they're judged against their peers. And when two players from the same draft class share the same stage, the differences get magnified. Suddenly, questions start forming that weren't there before. Not about upside, but about readiness. What made the comparison sting even more was how subtle it was. There were no taunts, no celebrations, just one quarterback steadily moving his team forward while the other struggled to find solid ground. That kind of disparity doesn't scream failure, but it whispers doubt. And doubt spreads quickly in this league. By the end of the night, the takeaway wasn't that one rookie had a great game and the other didn't. It was that one looked like he belonged in that moment, and the other looked like a visitor. That's a brutal realization to face in December football. And once that image takes hold, it's hard to shake, no matter how much potential remains. There's a thin line between confidence and desperation, and that line usually disappears under pressure. For Cleveland, the moment it vanished came when the game was still technically within reach. The scoreboard hadn't ended it yet, but the decisions on the field told a different story. Early on, the quarterback played tight but controlled, trying to stay within structure. But as the night wore on and opportunities slipped away, the approach changed. Throws became forced. Windows that weren't really there suddenly looked tempting. Instead of taking what the defense was giving, he started chasing the play that could flip everything at once. That's when panic creeps in. On one key drive, the defense had done its job. A stop. A chance to swing momentum. The offense took the field, and instead of settling into something manageable, everything sped up. The pocket collapsed faster in his mind than it did in reality. Progressions shortened. Eyes locked onto one target. The ball went into traffic where it never should have gone. It wasn't arrogance. It was urgency. The kind that tells a young quarterback he has to be the hero because nobody else will be. And in the NFL, that mindset is dangerous. Defenses thrive on it. They sit back, wait for the mistake, and punish it without hesitation. Once that interception happened, the shift was visible. Shoulders slumped. The offense moved slower between plays. Receivers started showing frustration. Hands went up after Roots, not asking for the ball, but asking what just happened. The belief that one good drive could change everything disappeared. From that point on, every snap felt like it carried the weight of the entire season. That's too much for any rookie to handle, especially in an environment that offers no margin for error. Confidence didn't vanish all at once. It leaked out, play by play, until panic filled the space it left behind. And when panic takes over at quarterback, the rest of the team feels it immediately. Sometimes it's not a throw or a loss that changes the conversation. It's a sentence. One honest moment that turns into fuel for everyone watching. That's exactly what happened after the game, when a simple question opened the door to a storm no one in Cleveland needed. The question itself was harmless. A reporter asked whether the cold had played a role. It was the kind of thing players hear all the time in December. Most brush it off. No excuses. I've got to be better. It's a routine exchange that disappears by the next morning. But this answer didn't disappear. He said he couldn't feel his fingers early in the game. On the surface, it sounded like honesty, maybe even vulnerability. But in the NFL, especially in the AFC North, that kind of admission hits differently. This is a division built on bad weather, physical defenses, and psychological warfare. When a quarterback openly acknowledges discomfort, defenses hear opportunity. That single sentence instantly shifted the narrative. It wasn't about mechanics anymore. It wasn't about protection or play calling. It became about toughness, about whether this quarterback could function when conditions were at their worst. Fair or not, that's how the league processes these moments. Opposing coaches file it away. Defensive players joke about it publicly and circle dates on the calendar privately. Fans latch onto it. Media loops it. What started as an offhand comment becomes a defining quote, stripped of context and replayed until it feels like a confession. The timing made it worse. This wasn't said in September. It came in December, in a city where cold isn't an exception, it's the identity. The words didn't just reflect a bad night. They raised questions about fit, about whether this was the environment he could thrive in long term. One sentence. That's all it took. In this league, that's enough to turn a rough performance into a full-blown narrative storm. And once that storm starts, it doesn't care how it began. This is where the conversation gets delicate, because nothing beyond this point is about confirmed facts. It's about perception, speculation, and the questions people around the league have started to whisper rather than say out loud. And to be clear, these are not accusations. They're observations layered on top of a very public moment. There's been growing buzz among fans and media that this situation might be less about ability and more about alignment. Reports claim some within NFL circles are wondering whether this environment truly matches the quarterback's personality and expectations. Cleveland is not a glamour market. It doesn't offer patience wrapped in sunshine. It demands grit, anonymity, and comfort with discomfort. The brand surrounding him has always been loud, confident, and polished. That's not a flaw. It's part of what made him special coming into the league. But some have speculated that this brand feels more natural in places where the spotlight shines differently. Warmer cities, bigger stages, controlled environments. That doesn't mean he can't succeed in Cleveland, but it does raise questions about whether this was ever the ideal fit. Body language has also fueled the conversation. Analysts have pointed to moments on the sideline where frustration looked less like competitive fire and more like detachment. Again, that's interpretation, not evidence. But in a league obsessed with optics, interpretation often becomes reality. Even online activity hasn't gone unnoticed. Small things get magnified when things go wrong. A post, a comment, a reaction that feels out of sync with the mood of the team. None of it proves anything on its own, but together, it creates a narrative people start to believe. The real danger is whether these rumors are true. It's that once doubt creeps in, it changes how everyone responds. Teammates, coaches, decision makers. The question stops being, can he do it? And quietly becomes, does he want to? And in a city like Cleveland, that question carries weight. It was supposed to be just another post-game moment. A quick exchange at midfield, helmets off, a few words, and then everyone disappears down the tunnel. Most of the time, these interactions barely register, but this one lingered, long enough that people noticed, long enough that it refused to fade. Cameras caught the two quarterbacks meeting near the logo. What stood out immediately was what was said, but how long it lasted. Seconds turned into nearly a full minute. One player was animated, talking, gesturing, pointing toward the field, then back toward his head. The other mostly nodded, eyes down, shoulders slightly slumped. It didn't look like a casual good game. It looked like a conversation with weight. Viewers started replaying it almost instantly. Clips circulated online within minutes, slowed down, analyzed, dissected. And while no one knows exactly what was said, the body language told a story people couldn't ignore. One quarterback looked assured, confident, comfortable in that moment. The other looked like someone absorbing information he didn't ask for but couldn't escape. That dynamic matters more than people want to admit. Quarterbacks are built on confidence. Swagger isn't a bonus, it's part of the job. When that presence cracks publicly, especially on a national stage, it sticks. Fair or not, perception becomes part of a player's resume. What made the moment sting even more was the context. These two had been linked for months, compared, debated, framed as parallel paths from the same class. All season long, the conversation hovered over who was ready now and who needed time. That handshake felt like an answer nobody wanted delivered so bluntly. For fans, it was uncomfortable. For the organization, it was worse. That image didn't live in a vacuum. It followed a night full of visible frustration, isolation, and doubt. The handshake didn't create those feelings. It amplified them. There's also the human side of it. Imagine standing there, fresh off one of the hardest nights of your career, while the person you've been measured against all year appears to be walking you through what just happened. Even if the intent was supportive, the optics cut deep. Moments like that linger in a player's head longer than missed throws. They replay themselves quietly, over and over. And when confidence is already fragile, those moments can either harden resolve or quietly drain belief. No one will officially acknowledge that handshake as significant, but everyone saw it. And once an image like that embeds itself in the story, it becomes impossible to unsee or completely move past. This is where the situation stops being emotional and starts becoming organizational. Because once the season reaches this point, teams aren't just playing games anymore. They're making decisions. And for Cleveland, the path forward is anything but clean. The Browns now find themselves in a familiar and uncomfortable place. Quarterback uncertainty with real stakes attached. Draft position, cap planning, coaching futures, all of it ties back to one question they didn't expect to be asking this soon. Do they stay the course, or do they pivot before things harden into something irreversible? Normally, a high draft pick brings clarity. You reset, you build, you move forward. But Cleveland already invested in a quarterback. That complicates everything. Moving on too quickly looks panicked. Staying patient risks wasting valuable time. And in the NFL, time is the one resource you never get back. What makes this even more difficult is the coaching dynamic. The system in place demands precision, rhythm, and decisiveness. It's built on trust in timing and structure. When that system clashes with a quarterback still learning how to process at NFL speed, friction is inevitable. Some around the league have speculated that the styles simply don't mesh. Oil and water. Not because either side is wrong, but because they speak different football languages. That forces ownership into a brutal choice. Do you protect the system and the coach who has proven he can win with it? Or do you reshape everything around a quarterback whose ceiling is still theoretical but whose learning curve is steep? History shows you can't half commit. Trying to make both sides happy usually leaves everyone frustrated. And organizations that hesitate here often end up stuck in the middle, neither rebuilding nor contending. This isn't about one game or one quote. It's about direction, identity, belief. The Browns have to decide whether this was a temporary storm or a sign they're heading the wrong way. And once that decision is made, everything else will follow quickly.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.